All right. Thank you, Jennifer. It's always a pleasure to connect again.
I know, it's been ages.
Exactly. We lost touch for a while now. I'm glad we were able to connect and share about your story, which I'm excited about in this journey. For anyone watching us, my name is Rich, and today I am hosting Jennifer Apiakubi. Well, she's actually a doctor, not a medical doctor. I should talk about it. She's a very smart lady. I'll be honest with you.
Thank you. I'll take that.
It's going to be a wonderful section, so don't go anywhere. Stay with us. Jennifer, again, thank you for coming and making yourself available for us to talk about your journey. I would like to start with a little bit about yourself. Basically, I'd love to understand your background from your bachelor's degree to your master's PhD, and then what you are currently doing and your focus. So we can start from that, and then we'll keep the conversation going.
Well, thank you, Rich. You probably dug yourself a big hole and you hid yourself in it, and I couldn't find you in several years. But it's always nice to meet and connect, whether it's in person or wherever. Yeah. And thank you for hosting me, by the way.
It's a pleasure.
I would say it's an honor for me to share my story and help other people to benefit from whatever it is that I benefited from. So to touch on your question, I did my undergrad in Ghana, KNUST. We all went to KNUST, right?
I don't know.
Right, but I was in KNUST, I did electrical engineering. So professionally, I'm an electrical engineer. And then after school, I worked for a while. I worked for a couple of years and then went back to school. And I did both my master's and PhD together in electrical engineering as well, specifically power systems engineering. And all of that was in Virginia Tech. Have I left out anything?
No, not really. We just want to talk about, because you're done with school, what are you currently doing?
Good question. So I finished school sometime 2 years ago, or a little over 2 years ago, and I'm a cybersecurity engineer at one of the national labs. I wouldn't say technically I'm a cybersecurity engineer, but because I am a power systems engineer, I get to practice both as well, because I did have some specialty in cybersecurity. So that is where the cybersecurity engineer title comes in. But pretty much it's electrical engineering with cyber attached to it.
That's a powerful combination, though.
Thank you.
Given the fact that some of these combinations, it's very important for the US to have people with skills like that. And I can say very few people could have a very good combination as you have in electrical engineering.
Right, I agree.
This is the first time of me hearing somebody has that kind of double combination. It's not that common. So it's a great combination.
Well, thank you. And perhaps as the story goes along, you probably see how all of it came together to help in the process for me. It made things a little bit easier for me. Yes.
Awesome. We can start about the process of the EB2 NIW. For anybody watching us for the first time, I'm focused on talking about EB2 NIW. I really advocate for each and everyone to take their own immigration into their own hands. I'm not saying going the route of a company is not good. Based on what I see, I work as a consultant. I know things are changing rapidly, and it's not in favor of international students. So this is where I'm always advocating for people to take their immigration into their own hands. So today, Jennifer, I have a quick question about your own process. I know you went through this route. First of all, what actually made you start this process? What was that kind of turning point in your life that I don't really think I want to use a company to get my green card? Let me start my own process. What was that turning point?
What was the turning point for me? Actually, that's a good question. So I heard from one of the professors in my university, Virginia Tech at the time. He was Ghanaian and I was very cool with him. I would have a chat with him every now and then and all that. And he mentioned to me that one of the Nigerians had gotten a green card. So naturally, I was curious. I was like, how did he get a green card? So thankfully, this Nigerian, and I don't remember his name, but he conducted a seminar webinar, right, for the African students, just about a week after the professor had told me that. So that was very timely.
Wow.
And he organized that and he said, hey, guys, did you know I got a green card? It was my first time hearing that anybody got a green card while in the US. So out of curiosity, I just I paid attention to this. And he mentioned the process of the EB2 and there was also the EB1. And that was my very first time hearing it. Why did I go for it? Honestly, I wasn't even planning to live in the US. I had never planned, right? I had never planned to live outside of Ghana. My aim and goal was get your PhD, go back home, teach, do something, encourage the youth and all that. But then I also started thinking to myself that it's not a bad idea to get it. You never know how things will change. So that is actually what got me thinking about the process. But why wasn't I ready to let a company do it for me? One, I didn't have that trust that a company, just about any company, would do it. What if I got into a company that wouldn't, right? And the second thing was I didn't like the feeling of swing. They
Yeah.
do it for you and you have to
Mm.
take you have to be with them for X number of years as a way of saying thank you. I like to say thank you to people. So naturally, I was like, oh, maybe if I can afford to do it myself, why not do it and let another person dictate for me when I get it? So that was how I got to know about it. That was how I got to be curious and just open to the idea. And that was also how I figured that perhaps I would rather do it myself than let somebody else.
That is true. That is so true about you. Need to do it for us. I think it's something about the Africans. We think if somebody helps us, we owe the person. And so we keep staying in the company, even if we get like good
Yeah,
offers.
I know.
I am in
Nothing about me.
general for a lot of Africans. I see that a
Yeah,
lot. That, oh, what if I leave right now? They'll think like, oh, I came here because of the green card. Of course, you came here,
right.
but I'm glad you're not turning point in your life. Timely way you had it, and somebody created a webinar for you to get more information about it. Out of curiosity, at what point in your PhD program did you hear about this?
That is a very good question. I had just finished my master's. So, my PhD was a direct PhD. So, I came straight from the undergrad into the PhD. And for the department at Virginia Tech, you get a master's en route to the PhD. So, I I had just finished the requirements of a master's degree and I'd gotten the master's. And I think just about 6 months after that, the webinar came in. So it was pretty timely for me because now I had the advanced degree and I could
Wow.
apply for it myself.
Wow. So basically, can we say your first year in your PhD program, or how does it work in Virginia Tech? Because literally you just started your PhD.
How do you mean though? I think I didn't get the question quite right.
Yeah, so what I meant was you were done with your master's, about to start your PhD. So
Right.
basically you got to hear about this process when your first year in your PhD.
Yes. So because it's a direct PhD, they put all the years you've done together.
I see.
So there was technically no first year for me. It was
Oh,
just a PhD.
I see. I don't understand how that works, but I think I get it now. So it's like direct PhD,
It's
you
a
have to
direct PhD.
fulfill the requirement of master's, which also cumulatively goes into your PhD.
It's cumulative, yes. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that brings us to the next point in terms of thought process, because there are two schools of thought. And for
Okay.
me personally, I always say when you are doing your PhD program, I would encourage anybody doing PhD to basically do it on your own. For me, my reason is because if you're able to do a lot of research, all of this process in EB2 NIW is about doing a lot of research and putting like a very convincing petition together.
Right.
What was your process like? Did you do it by yourself, or did you go the route of use an immigration attorney? How did you even start the process, thinking through, like, maybe I can do it. Maybe I should use an immigration attorney.
Right. The first thing I did was to try an attorney.
Okay.
So at the webinar, the gentleman said, oh, you need an attorney. I
Okay.
think I heard him say that. So my natural thing was, oh, I need an attorney. So I went to the attorney, gave him my stuff, and he was like, oh, you're only 75% there.
Oh,
So while I could have started this on my own, I allowed the attorney to discourage me from getting there because he said I was 75% ready. So he said, oh, how many citations have you got? And how many papers and how many journals and stuff like that. And I went by that, which was my number one mistake. I should have done my own research, but I guess the reason I thought I needed an attorney was because while the gentleman had said that, all the people that I spoke to after that encounter with this Nigerian friend all said attorney. Right. So I naturally thought an attorney was what you needed. So I actually ended up finishing my PhD. I got onto my OPT, started work. And then I said, I am ready for this. So that was when I spoke to somebody. And of course, I didn't think people knew, because I didn't know had this person not shared it. So I spoke to another Ghanaian friend of mine. I said, did you know there is EB2 XYZ? And she was like, oh, there was a kid in our school who did it. And he did it all by himself, having written a 20-page essay repeating the exact same things, and he got it. So I was like, really? People do this by themselves? And that was when I think the PhD in me got triggered. You know what? You have to do your own research. Don't leave it to people. So I had to, I got all the books, all the YouTube videos, everything. And then I started seeing that, oh, I can do this on my own. That was when I started putting my own story together. And for me, as I said, having a cybersecurity expertise, electrical engineering background, doing proper cybersecurity for power grids, which is a critical infrastructure, the story was perfect. I just had the story. So it wasn't very difficult for me thinking about what to say. I already knew what I had to say. So that was when the whole thing started. And that was sometime 2023. And it was January, I think, of
Wow.
that.
Wow. So
Yeah.
basically, you came to the US without knowing anything about EB2 NIW.
No idea.
And you literally were misinformed about, oh,
Misinformed.
if you
Yes.
were denied by an immigration attorney, it means your life is over. Go fix it. Go build up your profile.
Yep.
I think it's a common theme. My first interview with one lady, and her name is Esther. She was in the US for almost like 8 years. And
Right.
about EB2 NIW. Until one time, it's always like somebody has to say it. And I'm like, oh, really? I can do this on my own. So for
Right.
viewers out there, it's always important to do your own research. I always tell people, don't
Do
take
your own research.
it
Yes.
literally. Because I've always shared my story. I was also misinformed about this whole process until I was done with my
Right.
master's. Man, what can I do? I don't want
Yeah.
companies to do it for me. So I
Mhm.
want to take this in my own hands. Then I realized all the information I need are out there. USCIS websites, asking people, and even
Yes.
on YouTube. And then I
Yes.
found like, oh, this is really, really important. So the main thing is here is you literally do not need an immigration attorney to do
You
this.
don't.
You
No.
literally can do it by yourself. That is why it is called self-petition. EB2 NIW is
Yes.
self-petition. You can do it. And you save yourself a lot of money. So here you
Right.
go, right from Jennifer's map. You can do it by yourself. Because you
And
literally,
make sure you do your own research. If you don't get it, it's okay to ask. So I think, let me chip this in really quick. I think when the people started talking about it, I actually went to the website, but I thought the language was a little bit enshrouded in legal stuff. And I thought to myself, maybe it's true, I need the attorney. But the mistake I made was not having dug deeper than I did. And maybe if I had gone on YouTube, I would have found people talking about this, because when I was ready to do it, YouTube was the first place I got to. And I did find dozens of people
yeah,
talk about self petitioning. So don't let one thing sort of discourage you. Make sure you've done enough research, concrete research, to be able to say, I have done the research and I think this is what it is about. So that was the lesson for me. It delayed me by approximately a year and a half.
that's okay. Now at least you know, and now we are sharing the story here. Interesting. When people hear about people doing their PhD, all they think about is, well, and if you got it because you have like dozens of publications, you've gone for conferences, you have
Yeah.
citations. What is your background? Do you have publications? Basically, what were the evidence when you were trying to do the self-petition?
So when I was trying to do it myself, I had a few citations. It was just roughly 20. It was because I know people who had hundreds of them. It felt like so, and again, this was part of the reason why the first attorney told me I wasn't ready. At the time, I had 14, and he thought I wasn't ready. He said, oh, make sure you get somewhere a little above 50-ish. So I
Wow.
said to myself, this would take me 5 years. But anyways, the citations were one, but they were not the entirety of it. I also supported it with very good recommendation letters. And then I had articles written by high profile people who had mentioned that the problem I had tackled was
Oh,
a big problem. And actually, the DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, they
really?
had conducted an experiment from one of the national lab, and they had proven that it was a real and serious problem. And actually, the US was they were all about cybersecurity for the power grid. So, fun fact, 5 years ago, actually 9 years, wow, it's been 9 years, 9 years in Ukraine, cybersecurity attacks or cyber attacks, I'm sorry, took down Ukraine's power grid. And the US were actually tasked with helping to bring the grid back up and do the forensics and all of that. So they know it's a problem. And that was what my research had been about. So as for me getting White House publications, and Obama talked about it, Trump talked about it, Mr. Biden is talking about it. They've been talking about it since the Ukrainian problem.
Wow.
And every government had something to say. And then I think Congress had some publications too about it. So a bulk of my supporting documents were from the White House. There were several executive orders. And there were all the experiments that the government had conducted and the national labs had conducted. And then there were the literature that was from very high profile professors, award winning professors, all talking about this problem that I
Wow.
have just contributed just a bit to. So it was the stay. And the citation was just not the only way to go about it, you know. And I even if I hadn't written a paper yet, I still would have found a very good story to tell and good supporting documents. But as I said, I got discouraged. So yeah.
No, that is a good point. In all of these documentations, it is safe to say it wasn't so much about the publications and your research work, but mostly what you were doing was very critical. Basically,
Exactly.
what you were
Yes.
doing, the proposed endeavor
Yes.
was very critical to the US.
Yes.
Awesome.
Hmm.
So for anybody watching us, you mentioned about the white papers, executive orders. So literally
Yes.
the bulk of your petition was based on what people are saying out there, what the White House is saying, what
Right.
the president are saying, what like top level, top high level saying. That was the bulk of your petition, not so much focus on your citations and your research work.
Yes. So a lot of it had to do with the people who were talking about it and the executive orders and all that. But if you remember the process, you need to show that it's of national importance. So all of that comes to show that it's of national importance. But then you get to this part where you have to show that you are qualified to do
Exactly.
the work, or you are well positioned to advance the
Was
post endeavor.
endeavor.
I think that is what they say,
Yeah, that is
right? I had harder. So the citations were, and apart from just saying, oh, I had X citations, I made sure to cite the people or the that had made those citations. So I'll talk about the fact that thankfully one of the national labs had cited my work.
oh
And I keep going back to the national labs because the national labs are like the backbone of youth research.
right.
Everybody knows that. At least every face knows that, right? And it's big to hear that a national lab is taking your work and doing something
Wow.
about it. So I had one citation from them, and I had had some from Germany, some institutions in Germany. I had to mention that it's a worldwide problem, and actually, I had people on every continent citing my work. So that came as another piece of, just trying to get attention off the fact that I only had 20 citations, but to get it on the fact that these are the people citing the work. So that did some good for me. Well, I shouldn't say it that way. That would have done some good for me. And I also thought a lot about salary ranges.
Okay.
So I went to all the national labs, and then I started looking at what that job title would earn under normal circumstances. And then I said, here, look, I get a little bit above these people. Just to say
Above the
that
national
it's
average.
that the people actually work that I do. What else did I say? And then I talked about a few awards that I had gotten. And so the awards were not super international awards. They are not.
That is still
but
award.
well, an award. Hey, so what I did, I had gotten two fellowships, I think, and I had also gotten a few awards here and there, especially within Virginia Tech. So, as part of my proposed endeavor, I had mentioned that I was also going to teach some stuff, like pass on the knowledge. And those awards were speaking to the fact that I had the capability to do that because they were given in the light of that. So anything to show that I can do the proposed endeavor was exactly what I was looking for. And then, of course, came the recommendation letter. So in my use of the recommendation letters, I didn't just throw that out there and say, hey, look, I've got X recommendation letters. So I will take pieces of what the letters are saying as excerpts and put them in the cover letter. And I made sure that everything, you can read all the excerpts from different people, six different people, in one story.
Mm.
I made sure I took the right excerpt. Maybe partly because I also wrote the recommendation letters for my yes, and I actually sat down one night and crafted the story, and I said I want this person to say that and that person to say that.
Okay.
So I made sure it was a coherent story,
Wow.
a story that you can see from reading the six.
Wow. So literally you have six recommenders give you the step back. So basically, how did you identify these six people?
Right,
Because my understanding of this process, and you have gone through this process yourself,
right,
that you need people, basically you need a dependent and independent recommenders. And
right.
basically they don't know you, but they know your work.
Mhm.
Dependent is basically like a professor, they work closely with you and they know you. So
Right.
identifying these six, how did you go about identifying these people? And you already mentioned you wrote them yourself. So I'm just kind of curious, like what was the point writing all of the different recommenders? That's a lot of work though.
Thank you. It was. I won't lie to you, it was. But secret, ChatGPT. ChatGPT has made our lives way easier for us than it probably would have been. But okay, let's tell the story and then ChatGPT will come in. So I actually had seven references, seven. And I had four that I knew and three that, in fact, I knew all of them, but four were, what do they call them? The
Independent recommenders.
independent, and yes, yeah. So three of them dependent, four of them were not. But I chose them such that they had seen aspects of my proposed endeavor. So my
Okay.
proposed endeavor could be classified into two parts. A part where I'm continuing research in cybersecurity for power grids, and a part where I was going to teach that knowledge. And I deliberately, purposefully just added that I'm going to teach it because I knew I would get somebody to talk about it.
Wow.
And I knew I had awards there
Back
in
it up.
that space. So the whole proposed endeavor was sort of created thinking to myself, okay, what do I have? How do I make a story out of it? So that is how I started the whole proposed endeavor. So I added the teaching part of it, and one of my recommenders had been the director of Virginia Tech's, big one, just anonymous, but one of within Virginia Tech, and she was the director for that. And she had seen me again and again, and she had given me some of the awards herself, so she knew my
Wow.
work. And while she couldn't speak about my ability as a cybersecurity researcher, she could speak about my ability as a teacher, as a potential teacher, right? So that is where I got that from. And then the other three, one obviously was my advisor. And one also was somebody that I was working with. He was managing like dollars of research work at the lab.
Wow.
So he was a natural pick for me as well.
Wow.
And then the other three, so it was deliberate. I was looking for people that I can say are influential, right? And then the other three, one was the vice president of a very big utility company. He had come briefly to our school and I had given demos. So that was the thing in my PhD process. I would give demos to visitors.
Wow.
Yes, my
What demo? What do you mean? Like, is it like presenting papers? Or
presenting, but not a paper, presenting a test bed. And I'm running simulations. I'm showing you this is a real problem and this is how my solution is dealing with it.
wow.
So, and my advisor was at the center. So he would quickly arrange a demo for any of his guests.
Wow.
Okay, so through that, I made a few contacts, and big people would show up. Maybe because they had all passed through him at some point, and they also had affiliations with the school.
Wow.
And yeah, so they would come out, give the demo, and I'll form a relationship kind of, and maybe every year I'll say hello to you and all that. So those people had seen my work, although they had not worked with me, and I carefully identified the people I thought was very influential. Like if you have a big utility company, that is
That's
something.
huge.
That
It
is
is huge.
that is very big. So I deliberately chose that. I think about the time when I was putting it all together, our school was running the annual conference for the center, and my advisor invited me as a past student. And he was very happy to say, "Oh, this is Dr. So and so. She
Wow.
was here."
Actually, I know you.
I showed up, and I would have gone to the conference, but I knew this was also timely. It was time for me to get in touch with these people I had identified because they were going to come, and then talk in person to them and say, "Hey, would you like to do this for me?" So everything came together really well. It's amazing how it did for me.
No, I think first of all, you were intentional about putting out there.
I
I know you
was,
do
I
smart
was.
work. You're a very smart person. So I'm not surprised your director, your supervisor was happy to put you in that position, but you also
Oh,
delivered.
thank you.
When they come, you deliver. And that is how you build a connection. And most
I
importantly, be
believe so.
very strategic in identifying you need people who have that authority. Because I always tell people recommendation letters should come from people who have that kind of the highest level of authority in
Yes,
whatever domain it
yes,
is. And that is a huge thing. And I'm glad you went the same route, being very strategic and intentional about who you choose, who you select to give you the recommendation letter.
yeah.
And let's talk about how you did the letters. Because you said you literally wrote 6 recommendation letters.
Actually, seven.
Seven.
So seven, yes. So uh first of all, I PT said, "Hey chat, I'm in help.
If I need help.
Help me request help me." And chat GPT gave me something, but of course I put
Yeah.
my own unique words in there addressed to the different people. And all seven said we are happy to do it.
Wow.
Okay, so then I sat and I said, this person works in this space. They are familiar with this part of the problem. I want them to talk about X. This person is not a power systems engineer. They are a communicating science person, and they have seen me teach and compete in some, competitions. So I different aspects of the proposed endeavor because at this point I knew this is what my story is going to be about. Then I made the different people speak about it in different ways. I don't know if you get my point.
No,
So they are all not saying the one thing. They are saying different parts of it, but you can read the whole thing and it's like a good story. Some of them decided to write it themselves. But I think because I had provided them with the recommendation letters, they sort of looked at what I had written and formed their own essays out of that.
I
So it
see.
still came back together very well. So yeah, that is I just endeavor very clearly in their minds.
Clearly.
Then they craft the recommendation letters around that. Yeah.